camera operator was adjusting his lens when he noticed something unusual. Michael Jackson's hands were completely steady as he reached for his water glass, but there was something in his eyes, a depth that suggested tonight's interview would be different from anything the world had ever seen before. If you want to see how one question changed everything for the King of Pop, make sure to hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell because this story will leave you speechless. It was March 15th, 1995, at Neverland Ranch in Santa Barbara, California. Oprah Winfrey was conducting her second major interview with Michael Jackson, and this time she had promised something unprecedented: complete transparency. No predetermined topics, no rehearsed responses, and for the first time ever, direct audience questions from carefully selected fans who had traveled from across the country. The preparation for this interview had been months in the making. Michael's team had initially been hesitant about the unscripted format, but Michael himself had insisted. "If we're going to do this," he had told his manager, "let's do it right. No barriers, no scripts, no safety nets. The world deserves to see the real person behind all the speculation." The selection process for the audience had been meticulous. Out of over 50,000 applications from fans worldwide, only 30 people had been chosen. Each applicant had to submit not just their fan credentials, but personal essays about how Michael's music had impacted their lives. The producers were looking for depth, authenticity, and the kind of life experiences that would generate meaningful dialogue rather than superficial celebrity worship. The setting was intimate yet grand. Michael's private library at Neverland, surrounded by thousands of books and personal artifacts that told the story of a man constantly seeking knowledge and understanding. The room itself seemed to breathe with history. First edition philosophy books sat next to children's storybooks. Academic journals on psychology neighbored comic books, and classical music scores shared shelf space with handwritten lyrics that would never see commercial release. Michael appeared relaxed, wearing a simple black shirt and his signature armband, his demeanor confident yet approachable. What viewers at home couldn't see was the subtle nervous energy of the production crew. This was uncharted territory, a completely unscripted primetime interview with the most famous person on the planet. Camera operators had been instructed to keep rolling no matter what happened. Sound engineers were prepared for anything from whispered confessions to explosive revelations. But as the evening progressed, it became clear that this wasn't going to be about scandal or controversy. This was going to be about something far more rare and precious: genuine human connection happening in real time on live television. The 40-minute interview had been flowing beautifully, with Michael sharing insights about his creative process, his philanthropic work, and his vision for the future of entertainment. He spoke with the wisdom of someone who had spent decades observing human nature from a unique vantage point, simultaneously part of the world and separate from it. "Michael," Oprah had said earlier, "tonight feels different. You seem more at peace." "I am at peace, Oprah," Michael had replied with that gentle smile that could light up any room. "I've learned that truth is the only foundation worth building on." But neither Michael nor Oprah knew that this foundation was about to be tested in ways neither could have imagined. Among the carefully selected audience members was Jennifer Thompson, a 34-year-old elementary school teacher from Detroit. Jennifer's selection hadn't been random. Her essay about how Michael's music had carried her through her battle with lymphoma had moved the producers to tears. But what they didn't fully understand was the depth of her experience. Jennifer had spent 18 months in treatment, during which she had not only battled a life-threatening disease, but had also undergone a profound spiritual and emotional transformation. Her essay, titled "When Healing the World Begins with Healing Yourself," described how she had discovered Michael's Earth song during her first round of chemotherapy. "As I sat in that chair with poison flowing through my veins to kill the poison that was already there," she had written. "Michael's voice reminded me that healing isn't just about survival. It's about remembering why survival matters." What Jennifer brought to Neverland that night wasn't just fandom. It was the perspective of someone who had stared into the abyss and returned with wisdom about what truly matters in life. The other audience members sensed something different about her immediately. While they were nervous with excitement about meeting their idol, Jennifer carried a calm centeredness that seemed to create a peaceful space around her. The audience question segment began lightheartedly. Fans asked about Michael's favorite songs to perform, his inspiration for the Scream music video, and his plans for future albums. Michael's responses were thoughtful and engaging, and the intimate setting allowed for a warmth that rarely came through in large press conferences. One fan from Texas asked about his creative ritual when writing songs. "Do you have a specific place or time when inspiration strikes?" Michael smiled, his eyes lighting up with genuine enthusiasm. "Music doesn't keep business hour," he said with a gentle laugh. "Some of my best ideas have come at 3 in the morning, when the world is quiet and I can hear my own thoughts clearly. I keep a recorder by my bed because melodies don't wait for convenient moments." Another fan, a young man from Chicago, asked about his collaboration process with other artists. Michael's answer revealed not just his professional approach, but his philosophy about human connection. "Every collaboration teaches me something new about trust," Michael explained. "When you're creating with another person, you're essentially saying, 'Here's a piece of my soul. Will you handle it with care?' The best music comes from that kind of vulnerability." The questions and answers continued in this vein for nearly 20 minutes, creating an atmosphere of genuine intimacy that made everyone in the room feel like they were part of an extended conversation among friends rather than witnesses to a formal interview. Then Oprah called on Jennifer Thompson. Jennifer stood slowly, and those watching could see she wasn't nervous in the way typical fans might be. There was a calmness about her, the kind that comes from having stared death in the face and emerged with a profound understanding of what truly matters. "Mr. Jackson," Jennifer began, her voice clear and steady, "your music saved my life during my darkest hours fighting cancer 2 years ago. But I have a question that I think only someone who's faced their own mortality can ask." Michael leaned forward slightly, intrigued. There was something about Jennifer's presence that commanded attention, not just his, but everyone's in the room. "What is it that you fear most?" Jennifer continued. "Not about your career or your legacy, but about yourself as a human being?" The question hung in the air like a musical note that hadn't yet resolved. Michael was quiet for a moment, and viewers could see him processing not just the question, but the intention behind it. There was something about the way Jennifer had asked it, not with the breathless excitement of a typical fan, but with the steady curiosity of someone who had grappled with profound questions and wasn't afraid of profound answers. The other audience members seemed to sense that something significant was happening. The casual chatter that had characterized the previous questions died away completely, replaced by an attention so focused it was almost palpable. Michael's response, when it came, surprised everyone, including, it seemed, Michael himself. Instead of the carefully considered answer everyone expected, he laughed. Not a dismissive laugh, but the kind of laugh that comes when someone recognizes a truth they hadn't expected to encounter. "You know what's interesting about that question, Jennifer?" Michael said, leaning forward in his chair. "Most people would ask me what I'm most proud of or what I hope to be remembered for. But you're asking me what I fear. And the interesting thing is, I think those two questions might have the same answer." But then Jennifer did something that surprised everyone. She didn't wait for his response. Instead, she shared something that would change the entire trajectory of the conversation. "The reason I asked," Jennifer said, "is because when I was lying in that hospital bed, connected to machines, watching my hair fall out, I realized that all my fears weren't really about dying. They were about disappearing, about leaving this world without making a real difference, without being truly known for who I was underneath all the labels and expectations." Michael's expression shifted. Something in Jennifer's words had reached a place in his soul that he rarely allowed anyone to access. The cameras captured the exact moment when his public persona began to dissolve, not into weakness, but into something far more powerful, complete authenticity. "Jennifer," Michael said, and his voice carried a weight that hadn't been there moments before, "I need to ask you something first. When you were going through your treatment, when you were at your most vulnerable, did people treat you differently? Did they start seeing Jennifer the cancer patient instead of just Jennifer?" The question caught Jennifer off guard, but she answered immediately. "Yes, suddenly I became my disease to some people. Everything else about me, my teaching, my sense of humor, my dreams, seemed to disappear behind this one overwhelming reality. Michael nodded slowly. That's exactly what I thought you'd say. And that's exactly why your question matters so much. You want the truth? Michael said, his voice taking on a quality that was both vulnerable and powerful. The truth is, Jennifer, that your question is the question I ask myself every single night. He stood up from his chair and walked to one of the tall windows overlooking the Neverland grounds. For a moment, he was silhouetted against the evening light, and the image was so striking that one of the camera operators later said it looked like a painting of a man contemplating eternity. People ask me all the time if I ever get tired of the attention, if I ever want privacy, if I ever wish I could just be normal, Michael continued, his back still to the audience. But those aren't the right questions. The right question, your question, cuts much deeper. When he turned back to face the room, his expression was one of complete openness. I don't fear death, Jennifer. I don't fear physical pain or professional failure or even public humiliation. Those are all temporary things. What terrifies me is permanence, specifically the permanent misunderstanding of who I actually am. Oprah, sensing that something profound was happening, remained completely silent, allowing the moment to unfold naturally. She had interviewed thousands of people over the decades, but she had never seen anything quite like what was happening in front of her. This wasn't just a celebrity opening up. This was a human soul choosing to be completely transparent in front of millions of people. Behind the cameras, the production crew stood frozen. The director had his hand hovering over the button that would cut to commercial, but something in the quality of the moment made him hesitate. This wasn't television anymore. This was something closer to documentary truth, and everyone in the room seemed to understand that interrupting it would be a kind of sacrilege. People see Michael Jackson, the performer, Michael continued, his gaze never leaving Jennifer's. They see the glove, the moonwalk, the songs, the videos. But what keeps me awake at night isn't the fear of failure or criticism or even death itself. He paused, and the silence in the room was so complete that the soft ticking of a distant clock became audible. What terrifies me, Michael said, his voice now carrying the weight of absolute honesty, is the thought that when I'm gone, people might only remember the image, the spectacle, the controversy, and completely forget the heart behind it all. Jennifer nodded, understanding passing between them like an invisible current. I've spent my entire life trying to perfect the art of connection, Michael continued. Every song I write, every performance I give, every charitable act, it's all been my attempt to reach through the noise and touch something real in people's hearts. But the cruel irony is that the more successful I become at reaching millions, the more isolated I feel from genuine human connection. The audience was completely transfixed. This wasn't the Michael Jackson they thought they knew. This was a man speaking with the kind of raw honesty that few people ever achieve, even in private moments. Jennifer, you said my music saved your life, Michael said, now standing and walking closer to where she sat. But what you don't realize is that knowing my music could serve that purpose. That's what saves me. When I'm creating, when I'm pouring my heart into a melody or a lyric, I'm not afraid anymore. Because in those moments, I know that my soul is speaking directly to other souls. Oprah watched this exchange with the fascination of someone witnessing television history unfold. In 40 years of interviewing, she had never seen such an immediate and profound connection form between a celebrity and an audience member. But here's what really haunts me, Michael continued, his voice growing stronger rather than weaker with each admission. I'm 36 years old and I've been performing professionally for 25 years. I've achieved things that most artists only dream of. But sometimes, late at night in this big house, I wonder, who am I when the music stops? Who is Michael Jackson when he's not being Michael Jackson? Jennifer's eyes filled with tears, not of sadness, but of recognition and compassion. Mr. Jackson, she said softly, may I tell you what I learned in that hospital room? Michael nodded, genuinely curious about her answer. I learned that we don't disappear when we stop performing our roles, Jennifer said, standing now to face him directly. We become more real. The woman who fought cancer wasn't the teacher everyone knew at school. She was someone deeper, braver, more authentic than any role I'd ever played. And the music that reached me during those darkest nights wasn't created by Michael Jackson, the superstar. It was created by Michael, the human being, pouring his real struggles and hopes into melodies. The impact of her words was visible on Michael's face. For a moment, the mask of celebrity completely disappeared, replaced by something far more powerful: absolute authenticity. "You know what I realized?" Michael said, his voice now filled with a kind of wonder. "The thing I fear most, being forgotten for who I really am, can't actually happen, because who I really am is already in every song I've ever written from the heart. It's in every child I've helped, every cause I've supported, every moment like this one, where I choose honesty over image." Oprah, recognizing that something historic was happening, made a decision that went against every television protocol. She stood up and walked over to where Michael and Jennifer were now standing face to face. "I need to say something," Oprah announced to the cameras. "In all my years of broadcasting, I've never seen anything like what's happening right here. This is what real human connection looks like. This is what happens when we have the courage to ask the questions that matter and the wisdom to answer them truthfully." Michael turned to include Oprah in the conversation. "You know what's beautiful about this moment?" he said. "Jennifer asked me about my deepest fear, and by answering honestly, I realized that the fear was based on a false premise. I was afraid of being forgotten for who I really am. But who I really am has never been hidden. It's been in plain sight all along, in every genuine moment I've ever shared with the world." Jennifer wiped her eyes and smiled. "Mr. Jackson, your music didn't just help me survive cancer. It taught me that our vulnerability isn't our weakness, it's our superpower. When you sing Man in the Mirror, or Earth Song, or Heal the World, you're not hiding who you are, you're showing us exactly who you are." The conversation continued for another 20 minutes, with other audience members joining in, sharing their own stories of fear, authenticity, and the courage to be real in a world that often rewards pretense. Michael's responses revealed a wisdom and emotional intelligence that the public rarely got to witness. A woman from Seattle talked about her fear of aging in a youth-obsessed culture. Michael listened intently and then shared his own experience. "I've been performing since I was 5 years old. I've literally grown up in public. But you know what I've learned? The parts of me that matter most, my capacity for love, my desire to help others, my ability to create, those things don't diminish with age. They deepen." A young man from Boston asked about dealing with criticism and judgment. "Mr. Jackson, how do you handle it when people make assumptions about who you are based on limited information?" Michael's answer was immediate and heartfelt. "I've learned to distinguish between noise and signal. Noise is what people say about you based on rumors, photographs, or their own projections. Signal is what you know to be true about yourself and what the people who really know you confirm. The trick is learning to turn down the noise without also turning down the signal." The depth of these exchanges created an atmosphere unlike anything typically seen on television. It was as if the normal boundaries between performer and audience, celebrity and fan, had dissolved into something much more meaningful. A group of human beings having an honest conversation about what it means to be alive in a complex world. When the formal interview concluded, something unprecedented happened. Instead of immediately wrapping up, Michael asked if the cameras could keep rolling for a few more minutes. "I want to do something I've never done before," he announced. He walked over to the piano in the corner of the library and sat down. "Jennifer, this is for you, and for everyone who's ever been afraid of disappearing," Michael said. "But it's also for me, because tonight you helped me remember why I do what I do." Michael began playing a gentle melody, and then he started singing, not one of his famous hits, but an improvised song that seemed to flow directly from the conversation they just shared. The lyrics spoke of connection, authenticity, and the courage to be vulnerable in front of the world. It was raw, unpolished, and absolutely beautiful. When he finished, the room was silent except for the soft sounds of people crying, not from sadness, but from the overwhelming beauty of witnessing something completely spontaneous and genuine. As the final notes faded away, something unexpected happened. Jennifer Thompson stood up from her seat and began walking toward the piano. Security instinctively moved to intercept her, but Michael raised his hand, stopping them with a gentle gesture. "Jennifer," he said softly, "what is it?" "Mr. Jackson," she replied, her voice steady despite the tears on her cheeks. "During my treatment, when I was at my absolute lowest point, I made myself a promise. I promised that if I survived, if I got the chance to really live again, I would never let fear stop me from telling people what they mean to me." She reached into her purse and pulled out a small worn notebook. "This is my journal from the hospital. I wrote in it every day during chemo. And on the worst day when the doctors weren't sure I was going to make it, I wrote something I want to read to you." Michael gestured for her to continue, and the cameras captured every word as Jennifer opened to a dog-eared page. "March 3rd, 1993, she read aloud. "Today was the hardest day yet. My body is failing me, but my spirit found something to hold on to. I listened to Man in the Mirror 7 times in a row, and each time I heard something different. Michael Jackson doesn't know me, will never know me, but his music is teaching me how to fight. If I survive this, I want to tell him that he saved a life today. Not through medicine or miracles, but through the simple act of one human soul speaking truth to another." The silence in the room was profound. Michael stood up from the piano bench and walked over to where Jennifer stood. "May I see that?" he asked gently, gesturing to the journal. Jennifer handed it to him, and Michael carefully turned through several pages, his expression growing more moved with each entry he read. Finally, he looked up at her with wonder in his eyes. "Jennifer, do you realize what you've just given me? This journal, these words, they're proof that connection is possible. Real, life-changing connection between people who have never met, but whose hearts recognize each other across any distance." He closed the journal carefully and handed it back to her. "Would you do something for me? Would you consider sharing more of these entries? Not for publicity or fame, but because I think there are other people fighting their own battles who need to hear these words?" Jennifer nodded, overwhelmed by the request. "Mr. Jackson, I brought something else tonight." She reached into her purse again and pulled out a small velvet bag. From it, she removed a simple silver bracelet. "I wore this through every chemotherapy session. It has a small charm. It says 'Heal the World,' because that song became my anthem. I want you to have it." Michael accepted the bracelet with hands that were visibly shaking. "Jennifer, I can't take this. This is too precious. It's part of your survival story." "That's exactly why you should have it," Jennifer replied firmly. "My survival story isn't complete until it becomes part of someone else's healing story. This bracelet has already done its job for me. Now maybe it can do something for you." As Michael fastened the bracelet around his wrist, Oprah finally broke her professional silence. She had been watching this exchange with the fascination of someone witnessing television history unfold, but the journalist in her recognized that this moment needed to be acknowledged. "Ladies and gentlemen," Oprah said, addressing the cameras directly, "I need to say something as someone who has spent decades interviewing people from all walks of life. What we've just witnessed isn't just television. This is what authentic human connection looks like when two people have the courage to be completely honest with each other." She turned to address Michael and Jennifer. "You've both shown us something remarkable tonight. Michael, you've demonstrated that vulnerability and strength aren't opposites. They're partners. And Jennifer, you've shown us that sometimes the most powerful gift we can give someone is the story of how they've already changed our lives without knowing it." Michael looked down at the bracelet on his wrist, then back at Jennifer, then at the audience, and finally at the millions of viewers he knew were watching from home. "You know what just happened here?" he said, his voice filled with a kind of amazed gratitude. "Jennifer asked me about my deepest fear, the fear of not being truly known or understood. And then, without even realizing it, she provided the answer to that fear. Through her journal, through her honesty, through her courage to share her story, she showed me that real connection is not only possible, it's happening all the time, in ways we might never even know about." The camera captured his expression as a look of genuine peace settled over his features. "I came into tonight's interview thinking I was going to answer questions about my career, my music, my future plans. But Jennifer, you've given me something much more valuable. You've given me proof that the thing I was most afraid of, disappearing without being truly known, is actually impossible. Because every time someone connects with something genuine I've created, a piece of my real self becomes part of their story. And that's not disappearing. That's multiplication." In the weeks following the interview, the response was unlike anything in television history. The network received over 100,000 letters from viewers sharing their own stories of fear, authenticity, and the courage to be vulnerable. Many credited Michael's honesty with inspiring them to have difficult but necessary conversations in their own lives. Michael himself seemed transformed by the experience. His subsequent performances took on a new depth, and his interactions with fans became notably more personal and meaningful. He often spoke about the Jennifer interview as a turning point in his understanding of his own purpose. Jennifer Thompson returned to her teaching job in Detroit, but her life was forever changed as well. She began incorporating lessons about authenticity and courage into her classroom, and eventually wrote a book about her experience titled The Question That Changed Everything. The interview became required viewing in psychology and communications programs across the country, studied as an example of how genuine human connection can happen even in the most public settings. Years later, when asked about that night, Michael would say, "Jennifer didn't just ask me about my fear, she helped me transform it. She showed me that the thing I was most afraid of losing was actually the thing that could never be taken away." The authentic connection between souls that happens when we choose truth over safety. The March 1995 Oprah interview proved that even at the height of fame, the most powerful moments happen when we have the courage to be completely honest about our deepest fears and highest hopes. Michael Jackson didn't break down that night. He broke through to a level of authenticity that reminded millions of people around the world why genuine human connection is worth every risk. Sometimes the most important performances aren't on stage, but in the moments when we choose to show up as exactly who we are, fears and all. That night, Michael Jackson gave his most powerful performance of all, being completely, authentically human.